Hi, I'm CarolAnn Tutera. My friends call me Kat, and I've been referred to as an ambassador for aging. Today we have Joe DeBello with us, who is a certified personal trainer for 28 years. He's also called the anatomical architect, so we'll get into that. And he has a doctoral level training in natural health. So thank you for joining us today, Joe. We're very excited to have you here and discuss your philosophy on aging. And I understand you have a new book coming out. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here, CarolAnn. Tell me about myself, or tell you about myself. I'll tell you. Okay. Well, here's the thing. I got into personal training back in 1987 when I found out that my knees were in very bad shape and they wanted to give me fake knees. So fast forward about 7 years, and after having studied everything I could while working full-time as a mortgage banker, I found ways of micromuscular movements, having studied Peter Egoscue's method, Reiki, massage, stretching, bodybuilding, ballet, looking at all of them, knowing that all of them had incredible intelligence, but very narrow focused. So, as some of the best writers have always said, is they copy from the best and then they put it in their own words. So I basically took the best of all of those and instituted them into my own way of fixing my parts naturally, with finding the imbalances in all of the joint point attachments of the muscles. So it became a fun odyssey. And when I would train myself, I looked at my body as though it were a puzzle, looking at each piece and see how the length of the muscle on one side of, for example, the quad, would not balance the other, and follow that muscle up, its attachment into the hip, and just it goes on and on and on. As you know, CarolAnn, having worked out pretty much your whole life, there are 637 muscles in the body and 206 bones, and they attach in many ways, from diagonal, horizontal, vertical, and there's also a few other planes called the sagittal and blah, 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 blah. So with all of that, when you pay attention to your body, it actually becomes very fun, and it's a very non-dogmatic way of training the body, because you don't go to a machine to work out your quads or your biceps. You perhaps use rubber bands or isometric flexions to work on that piece. So that's a very long answer. That's how I got started, is I had the problem. Nobody could fix it. I didn't want to do surgery. So I having always loved architecture and physics and geometry, taking those three, I suppose, subjects, I made it. The first was called the Physique Mystique, because I liked the rhyming of it, and always being a fan of Dr. Seuss. So, and then in 2004, I took that and I had lots of acronyms for every single solitary movement that everybody that trained, we carry them forward. And we never duplicated moves, and it was always based on that person's particular problems and how they could change it, not in the gym with me, but outside in the world. And so how they stand, how they sit, how they brush their teeth, what hand they use to drink, and on and on. And it is a lot of fun because it never ends, because our bodies have so many ways to move. and you can fix yourself. So, have you fallen asleep yet? No.
A lot of information you've thrown out at us. So let's back up, because you like to be called the anatomical architect.
Yes.
So I guess that draws upon your love of the 3 items that you mentioned.
Yes.
So I know what that means because I've trained with you in the past. And I will say this is the hardest training I've ever put my body through without using machines or weights, free weights. So explain to people who don't know, what exactly is an anatomical architect? Break that down for us in a really simple, understanding way.
Well, as with most things, it's a made-up term. And so anatomical meaning the body, and architect meaning structure, framework, foundation, how a thing is built from the ground up or from your joint points out to the next joint point. And always, most importantly, always, speaking of foundation, the feet. You know, the feet are the first line of defense that any human being has, whether they take each step that they do take that is constructive or deconstructive. So perhaps something that you've mastered and something that anybody listening could do throughout their day is look down at your hand, and if I asked you to splay your fingers wide, in other words, push your fingers wide, I would want you to do that with your toes. And then look down at your toes. Look down at each foot and see which foot is easier to do the splay. And with that simple direction that you give yourself, if you attempt to splay the toes of any or both of the feet for 1 moment as you walk, for 1 minute, 60 seconds as you walk, what happens is the foot muscles actually fatigue and you can actually feel them. So the great news is you're not doing the damage and building calcium deposits around the joint points in the ankles and the feet, which translates to not stressing out your knee joints, your pelvic girdle, your spinal column, and up to the neck. And so it's literally every step we take, every move you make, that sting song, it affects how you build your body or not. So it's a very singular odyssey, and it's not something that's calibrated or you can broadcast on social media, and unless you want to, because it's so much fun. Today I was able to do 4 minutes of a toe splay walk, and I felt the inner aspects of my feet. In other words, the big toe. Just call it the inner aspect. If you're a golfer, you know that. You have to plant the inner aspect of your foot, which translates to the big toe plane of the foot through the arch of the foot back to the heel. Most of us, if you look down at the wear and tear of your feet or the shoe, you can see that we usually stand on the outer aspect of your foot, which is the baby toe plane. So if you take that minor muscular movement and you put it to work, you will actually, and most likely for the first time ever, feel muscles in your calves, in your feet, and your ankle that you have never felt. And you will actually begin to sculpt, if you continue to do so, the muscles in your thighs and your butt in a completely different manner.
Well, I'm trying to sit here and splay my toes in pointed shoes, so that's not working. I'm going to have to change my shoes in order to splay my toes.
There you go.
And walk properly.
Very good.
And what I think is fascinating is, yesterday, remember, Dr. CarolAnn, I was talking about massages and so on. Joe, this is Danny here. As you know,
hello, Danny.
I had gone to physical therapy for something that had been bothering me with my back.
Oh.
And I just wasn't finding any relief with it. It really, and I went after physical therapy. I waited a day, and then I went to a local foot massage and reflexology. And when they were touching the different pressure points on my feet, so I find this fascinating that you're actually talking about the feet. But I had so much better results from that foot massage and that reflexology and the points they were touching. And as you were saying, it develops I could feel when they were touching different pressure points on my feet. I could feel it throughout my body.
Isn't it the most amazing thing?
Yeah,
it's extraordinary.
I was shocked. Yeah, it is. And I honestly felt that was a far more therapeutic value to me. I felt better after that than going to a physical therapist. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go to physical therapy, but for me personally, I felt that this was a very healthy thing for me. So I think it's fascinating about how much benefit, and I think how much people neglect their feet, and how much power you have in exercising your feet. I didn't even know you could really do that.
Yes.
It's really cool.
You know, what's interesting is physical therapists are brilliant at what they do. However, if you'll notice, what they've always done is the orthopedic doctor will usually send the patient and to the physical therapist, and they'll always walk out with a Xeroxed or mimeographed handout with perhaps a couple circles in the exercises you should do. So it's not very detailed, and as human beings and as complex as our interconnected parts are, we really need that extraordinary attention so that we can heal ourselves, not just do a replicated number of movements that have been done forever and not really indicated for your particular ailment. So,
exactly. It's not personalized at all.
Right.
It's very generic, I think.
So what's cool is somebody who is as aware as you, Danny, you having been brought and made aware of that with physical touch, and then the intelligence of the person hitting your acupressure points, and then you applying that awareness to make your pains go away. It's a blast because no one likes pain. So, in reference to, I mentioned earlier about acronyms, and I take words that usually, like the word pain, it's kind of this thing that you experience. It doesn't really mean much other than, I have a pain. So over the years, having the pleasure of working with, I've actually trained about 50,000 hours, and each and every one of those I pay extraordinary attention. One, because I find it fascinating to watch anybody become aware and that light turn on in their eyes, because they have a way to make themselves feel better throughout their day. Not just, okay, I'll see you in 48 hours, your next training period, and we'll do 15 sets of it. I give them homework, which is just an awareness. Perhaps getting back to my point, pain is an acronym, and I've made it into a companionym. So I've taken the 4 letters, PAIN, and what has worked in the past, because when you look at pain as what it is for the body, it's the body, the neuromuscular system's interconnectivity telling you that there is something amiss in your frame. So the pain, the companionym for it is a perpetually aware intuitive network. Because that's what it is. You are now gifted by yourself, Danny, with now being really aware in a perpetual state of your neural network and how you can change the way your foot lands so that you don't hurt, which means, in essence, you begin to heal yourself.
Right. And pain is so different for everyone. Everyone has their own perspective of what's tolerable and what's not.
100%.
And I think that people also tend to, and correct me if I'm misspeaking, I think that men end up tolerating a lot more pain. I think, with my new husband, he got hurt. And he went around and didn't really complain about the pain because it's kind of like not the guy thing to do. And I think it almost makes it worse because you're not addressing the problem as soon as you should.
Yes. We as a male creature do that, yes.
Yes, I don't know why. It's very frustrating sometimes because sometimes, and pain is actually a good thing because it's kind of telling your body that, like you said, that something's wrong and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, it's a gift. It's a gift.
It's a gift. Yeah, this is telling you, it's giving you an opportunity to fix something. Because if we didn't have pain, how would we know that something's even wrong?
There you go.
But yeah.
Exactly.
So how do when you've been dealing with all these different people over the years? What do you think is probably, I have two questions for you. What do you think is your most frustrating experience dealing with people and probably your funniest experience?
Well, the most frustrating is, okay, you are, or you know humanity, human nature. 99% of the people that I've trained over these past 28 years have been women will come first in the couple, and then she will come, say, my husband's got this and he just won't come. And I've been there because we're taught differently than.
Is that another word for stubborn?
Well, there are men that would say that some women are stubborn. No, I'm not one of them.
I think it's actually. I think they're actually living in denial, and I'm not talking about the river in Egypt either.
Very good. That's very good. Okay,
so the women come first, and then they drag their husbands.
So the most frustrating, I'll address that first, is to when somebody. Okay, so the women come and they listen because it's all about them. It's not my way. It's not, you have to do this because this book says it. Let's look at what you do. How do you sit? When you stand up from your seat, which of your two globes, your two buttocks, leave more of an imprint, and then you kind of address that as to why. So when you're sitting, are you leaning more to one side? And it goes on and on and on and on and on. So it's really a lot of fun. So then the husband will come, and again, I've been in those shoes where I've had to address an issue, and I didn't want to do it. So the guy will come in and he'll, we don't like to talk about our pains because we just don't like to look vulnerable. That's just the nature of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we don't really say what is really going on until. So the most frustrating is, I'm like, dude, I've been blessed with pretty much every ache and pain in the world. You just tell me what it is, and I'm going to give you a couple little simple minor muscular movements to make it go away, and you'll feel better. You can stay with the ache and pain for 5 weeks, or, you can have this, and I usually have them push their thumb or their index finger into the muscular area that is bothering them. And all of us, normally, until we know our bodies better, if we have an ache or a pain, we usually push on the joint point, where the bones come into the ligament. When in fact, you, Danny, having gotten a massage, they don't push on that bony structure. They push on that malleable tissue, which is the muscles, and they do it in the flow pattern of that muscle fiber, so as to promote circulation, wherein the human body's natural brilliance to heal itself will do the work for you. So when they are instructed as to push not in the pain area, but in that adjacent, soft tissue muscle, so to speak, and their pains will usually dissipate, and that light comes on finally. But it's always that time frame to try to convince, and women too are, some women are, they're not as open-minded as other women, but much more so than most of us male creatures. So does that answer your question as to the most frustrating?
Frustrating, yeah. Yes, it does. And the funniest?
I have thousands of them. The majority of the time after a person begins, and I have been very fortunate, I've had some clients for 22 years. And they'll tell you that whether they came in during the season for 6 months, 3 times a week for an hour, or we've never duplicated a workout session because the human body can do so many different things. You can use a chair, you can use a table, you can brush your teeth. It's just endless. So the funniest, if you'll give me a moment, I'll get back to you.
So
okay, that's fine.
Let's move on to then, what's your perspective of authentic aging? Because I know you work with a select clientele that you had over in Rancho Mirage, and you had a lot of people who were aging, and we all are.
As opposed to those people that
As
aren't
opposed to
aging.
not aging. So I'm in that bracket.
Well,
So-
Danny, to answer your question, it's some of the funniest times. It's with her because she's very funny.
Really?
You know how she.
Yeah.
So how do you handle authentic aging for those of us who are now pushing 60? And I know, people listening are in their 50s, 40s, 70s. We're all over the board, and we all know we're aging. And just give me your perspective on it from your vantage point, from your viewpoint.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think of a very clever way to say it, but I'll just tell you how I don't look at aging at all, ever. It's just not on my radar because it has a very negative connotation wherein I'm aging and blah, blah, blah. It's not something that's ever addressed, just like a person's weight is never addressed, ever.
Very good.
Or their size of their clothes. I had and you know her, she's the lady that referred you 22 years ago. She had a clothing, still has a clothing store, and she used to get really bummed out about the size having gone up in the size, and then that translated into the ladies that came in to purchase clothing and had, and I said, are you really going to allow a number on a piece of clothing determine how happy you're going to be that day?
Yes, we are. I'm going to answer that for you right now. We are.
Well, and I think that goes back to so Joe, would you agree with this, that I think men look at aging very differently than women do. There's all these old cliches that men get better and more distinguished as they age, where women all of a sudden have this very negative, maybe they're putting on a little, and I think men, they gain pounds as they get older too, but women just have this negative, energy about themselves as they get older. Would you agree that men don't really think that way as they get older?
I would agree 100%. And I recall many, many years ago, and you'll correct me for my pronunciation. I think Helen Gurley Brown, wasn't she the editor and owner of Cosmopolitan?
Yes.
And her whole premise, and again, I'm sure this could be Googled and confirmed, but her whole premise was, my job in the magazine is to make women feel terrible, so they have to buy these products. And that's been going on for so many years that I think it's a rather insidious concept. Some people might call it brilliant. I don't share that. It's rather...
Well, it's a brilliant marketing concept, but...
Well, there's
it's not great.
No, so to answer your question, from my point of view, that's wherein I began the odyssey of assisting the women that I've trained over the years to say, give yourself just a tiny bit of a break. You have been brilliantly brainwashed by the media and all its wonderful forms to think that the only way that you can be happy is if you are the size of Twiggy, or if you've gone to this plastic surgeon, or you purchased this piece of clothing, or you use this makeup. So that is a very large thing that we have as a... when they'd come in, we would...
Culture, yeah.
Yeah, and then, of course, every time I had a client, we became a team to try to break down some of those stereotypes Not that it's my job from a psychological standpoint. It's just an awareness. Look, once somebody becomes kinder to themselves, the whole concept of aging becomes so much more graceful, because we do then not put a stress on ourselves that is self-induced, not necessary, and very counterproductive to the actual concept that you're trying to do and spend a great deal of money doing.
That's a great topic, and I know that Danny and I have that slated for another show about women and aging and numbers. So
Okay.
we'll circle back to that. That's wonderful.
Okay.
A few other things we want to discuss with you before we wrap up here is, where do you find your joy and excitement?
Where? In a box of Cocoa Pebbles.
See, mine is Lucky Charms, but I get that.
Terrific.
Where? It's just nature has always done it for me. I love looking at the stars. I love the moon. I love the mountains. I love trees. That's just one. I love architecture. There's so many beautiful things in life. Children, beautiful women. I mean, there's so many, like yourself, CarolAnn. You look familiar, but so yeah. No, it's where lately.
One thing. Just give us all one thing where you find joy and excitement. Okay, moving on.
Well,
That's still a work in progress.
well, yeah. I mean, I kind of already answered that. I don't really have one thing. I gave you a whole bunch.
Yeah, and for some people it's very hard, I think, to narrow it down to one thing.
Yeah, and I don't want to narrow it down, because then if it doesn't
Yeah.
occur, then my joy is hindered, and that is not something that is acceptable anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Touche.
I think that's a good point.
Touche.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's good if you have a lot of things that you find joy and excitement in.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier to be happy then.
Thank you,
It doesn't-
Dr. Danny. I appreciate it.
Now, the last thing, you've spoken earlier in the show about acronyms.
Right.
You mentioned briefly the word companionyms, and we
Right.
know that you have a first book out, working on a second one. So explain to us what the book is, and explain to everybody what a companionym is. I know you used that earlier in the show when you did pain.
Right.
So tell us more about that, because it's very intriguing how you're taking a word that has a negative connotation, you put a positive spin to it.
Right. Thank you for asking. For instance, a very popular topic, but it's charged, is the word God. So yeah, I have a bunch of them for God. It's grand order and design, goodness on demand. Just whatever. Anybody could take their name. Like my name, what comes to mind right now? Joe, Just One Earth, or something that has to do with me, since I love nature, Just One Earth. You can do it for Danny, you can do it for Carol, and I currently have almost 260.
So the question is, all great information you've been sharing with us, how did you come up with the name Companionyms?
Oh. Okay. Well, I've always loved acronyms growing up. I've always loved words. So I've always, when I hear a word, I've always broken it down to its component letter parts to make it very relevant. For instance, the other day I was wanting to do the word spirit. Because we all want to have being better spirits, or blah, 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 blah. So the first thing that came to mind, and of course refinement is always being done and will always change based on how we feel and the circumstances in our life. But spirit, the most recent one, was superpowers instituted right in time. So to make a religiously charged word just easier to swallow, so that it doesn't keep people from speaking to each other. That's more or less what inspired me to start Companion M's, and it all went way back to 1989 when I started working out. And then in 1991 when I started that first company, and then in 2004 when I started Life Fit, which is in fact a Companion M, and it stands for Low Impact Formative Exercises for Integrated Transformation. And I would do these for every single solitary word that came up that was relevant to a person's hour of training. And then that way, they would leave with something that was very personal. Remember, and it was easy to remember, so therefore it was easy to apply. So it's actually became something of a joy thing, wherein you could say to yourself, if I needed to change the left side because of its circumstances, then you could look at the word left and however it would be defined at that moment by that person's circumstance, then you would sit. It's a lot simpler than I'm making it sound, but I don't know if I've made it any clearer. Honest to God, I'm over here talking, and I'm less clear now.
Yeah. No, I think it's wonderful because I know that CarolAnn a long time ago, and also myself, we were teachers. We did teach at one point, and acronyms are an amazing way to get people to remember things easily. I don't know if you've ever used that. I'm thinking that's wonderful for fitness.
The mnemonic devices, I've always used them. And that's what. Thank you for helping me pull that out. I should have been prepared for this question because I'm not prepared for it. Honestly, I am not. So, it's a mnemonic device through acronyms to remember things, and that's exact. Thank you. We'll use
You're
this.
welcome.
We'll use this.
But yes, I think that, and every time I read the different ones that you do, I'm intrigued by them, and I think it's human nature. I look at it and say, well, that's really cool, and then I sit there and I start to doodle, and I try to make my own. So I like the fact that you've kind of given new definitions to words that have meaning to you, but I also think you're also getting people and encouraging them and kind of inspiring them to maybe make their own, which is great.
Again, thank you. No wonder it is you do what you do, because you've encapsulated that which I was unable to do. But yes, it is very exciting for me to have somebody look at mine and say, well, that doesn't work for me. This is mine. And I'm always amazed that that makes so much more sense. I like it so much better.
Well,
so
thank you.
Ultimately, sorry.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Joseph. It's been
pleasure.
Great. You've helped us break down ways to de-stress, unplug, and activate and use our body as we're aging in really wonderful ways. We've learned that acronyms, or your word, companionyms, are an excellent way to help us move throughout our daily lives. We look forward to seeing your book. And if you'd like to email us with feedback, questions, or want to be a guest on our next show, please email me at cataga1818 Again, it's cataga1818 Thank you again. Until we meet again, be happy, be safe, and be groovy.